1,000,000 naira to the pair that dares to make love on one of those graves. Mercy's eyes widened, but her smile was undeterred. You're on, Dayo. Let's see if these spirits are as protective as they say. They agreed to the bet, deciding that Dayo and Mercy would take on the challenge, driven partly by bravado and partly by the alcohol clouding their judgment. Equipped with a flashlight and more courage than sense, Dayo and Mercy left the guest house under the cover of night. Dayo and Mercy, fueled by a mix of adrenaline and alcohol, began to fulfill the dare. Emeka and Joy stood a little way off, their laughter hushed in the solemn atmosphere. Joy, caught up in the moment, shouted jokingly towards her friends, "Make sure you come on the grave." Her laughter echoed off the stone markers, a stark contrast to the silence around them. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows over the dusty road, a small van rattled towards the heart of a secluded Nigerian village. Inside, laughter and music filled the air. Emeka, the unofficial DJ of the group, played a mix of Afrobeats and highlife, setting a lively mood. Joy, always the planner, double-checked their itinerary, ensuring everything was set for their weekend getaway. Beside her, Dayo, the adventurous one, peered out of the window with a camera in hand, eager to capture every moment. Mercy, calm and collected, scrolled through her phone, occasionally showing the group pictures of the village they were about to explore. The van turned off the main road, and the scenery shifted dramatically. Lush green fields replaced the urban sprawl they were used to in Lagos. Children played football in a nearby field, their laughter carrying through the air as the van passed. Women balanced large baskets on their heads, walking with a grace that fascinated the city dwellers. The simplicity of village life, so starkly different from the bustling city, drew them all to the windows in awe. As they entered the village center, a tall figure waved at them energetically. This was Palumi, their tour guide, whose reputation as the best guide in the region had reached them even before their trip. His wide smile and open arms were infectious, and as the group disembarked, they were swept up in his enthusiasm. "Welcome to Ejoba," Palumi exclaimed, using the local name for the village, which meant kingdom in English. "You are about to experience the heart of our culture, the beauty of our land, and the mystery of our ancestors. I hope you're ready for an adventure." Palumi was dressed in traditional attire, a brightly colored buba and trousers, which immediately caught the group's attention. He handed each of them a small necklace made of beads and cowrie shells, a symbol of protection and welcome in the village. "First things first," Palumi continued, guiding them towards a large, open hut that served as the community center. "You must try some of our local palm wine. It's fresh, it's sweet, and it's the perfect welcome drink." As they settled into the hut, the villagers came forward with calabashes filled with the frothy white liquid. The drink was indeed sweet, with a slight tang that left a warm feeling as it went down. The group toasted to their trip, the village, and the adventures to come. Over the next hour, Palumi shared stories of the village's history, pointing out the chief's palace, the marketplace, and the sacred grove visible from their seats. But it was the mention of the graveyard that seemed to hang in the air, a hint of unease following his words. "The graveyard is the ancient resting place of our ancestors," Palumi said, his tone lowering slightly. "It's respected and feared for a reason. The spirits there are not to be trifled with." As they sipped the refreshing wine, Palumi began to share tales of the village. His stories painted vivid pictures of Ejoba's history and traditions, but it was his mention of the ancient graveyard that caught Dayo's interest the most. The atmosphere shifted subtly. The air seemed to thicken as Palumi spoke of the resting place of ancestors. Dayo, driven by a blend of intrigue and bravado, leaned forward. "Palumi, tell us more about this graveyard. Why is it feared?" he asked, his voice tinged with a mix of skepticism and fascination. Palumi's eyes flickered with a complex emotion, a mixture of respect and a hint of apprehension. "The graveyard is old, older than any living soul here," he began, his voice dropping to a hushed tone. "It is said to be protected by the spirits of those who rest there. We believe that these spirits watch over the village and maintain the balance between the living and the dead." He paused, scanning the faces of his audience to gauge their reaction. Many years ago, it was common for the youth to dare each other to enter the graveyard at night, but those who did often returned. Different, haunted, some said. So now, we respect that boundary out of honor and out of fear. Dayo's interest was clearly piqued, and his friends, sensing the gravity in Pulumi's tone, listened intently. The seed of curiosity was planted, and as the night progressed, the stories of the graveyard wove themselves into their imaginations. The evening continued with a feast of local dishes, each bite bringing them closer to the heart of Ejoba. Yet, as they retired to their lodgings under the vast, starry sky, the tales of the ancient and mysterious graveyard lingered in their minds, promising to revisit them in the days to come. The night had fully descended upon the village of Ejoba, with only the moon and stars casting a dim, natural glow over the thatched roofs. The friends gathered around a flickering fire outside their guest house, a cozy structure made of mud bricks and bamboo. The air was cool, a welcome relief after the heat of the day, and the crackling fire added a comforting ambience to their circle. Pulumi joined them, bringing with him a jug of palm wine and a small drum. "The night is young, and so are we," he declared with a grin. "Let me share with you the music of our ancestors. It's another way we connect with them, especially on nights like this." As he began to tap rhythmic beats on the drum, the sound seemed to blend with the nocturnal chorus of the village, the distant barking of dogs, the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze, and the occasional call of a night bird. Pulumi's storytelling shifted seamlessly into song, with verses that spoke of valor, love, and the mystery of life and death. Emeka, moved by the rhythm, clapped along, while joy and mercy swayed to the music. Dayo, however, found his thoughts drifting back to the graveyard. The stories of spirits and hauntings intrigued him more than he wanted to admit. "Tell us more about those who went to the graveyard," Dayo urged Pulumi during a break. "What happened to them exactly?" Pulumi hesitated, his expression turning solemn. "It's not just stories, you know," he said slowly. "I had a friend, Kunla, who went there on a dare. He was the bravest of us, always laughing in the face of danger. But after that night, he changed. He spoke of seeing ghosts that weren't there, of hearing whispers when alone. He moved away eventually, saying he needed peace. We don't really know if he actually saw anything, but one thing we know for sure is that the grave might be sacred or cursed." The group fell silent, the gravity of Pulumi's words weighing heavily in the air. The fire crackled, casting fleeting shadows on their faces, as if echoing the unseen dangers Pulumi described. Mercy, trying to lighten the mood, changed the subject. "Let's talk about tomorrow. What's the plan, Pulumi?" Grateful for the shift, Pulumi outlined their schedule. "We'll start with a visit to the local market. You'll meet the artisans, the farmers, and see the vibrant life of Ejoba in daylight. We'll also visit the river. It's the lifeblood of our village." As the night wore on, the stories and songs continued, but Dayo's mind lingered on the graveyard. The idea of a place so potent with unseen forces both scared and fascinated him. His curiosity was a flame fanned by the night's tales, and he found himself wondering if there really was truth to the legends. Eventually, the group retired to their rooms, the echoes of Pulumi's drum still resonant in the cool night air. But sleep did not come easily. The tales of the cursed graveyard stirred within them, especially Dayo, who lay awake, listening to the sounds of the night, half expecting to hear the whispers Pulumi's friend had spoken of. The night passed restlessly, with each sound and shadow seeming to carry the weight of the unknown. As dawn approached, the line between old wives' tales and eerie possibilities blurred, setting the stage for a day filled with exploration and perhaps a touch of the supernatural. Morning broke with a chorus of roosters announcing the dawn. The friends awoke, still tinged with the unease from last night's stories, but the vibrant sunlight streaming through the windows promised a new perspective on the village of Ejoba. After a hearty breakfast of akara and pap served by the local innkeeper, Pulumi arrived, dressed in a less formal but equally colourful shirt. His smile was contagious as he greeted them with renewed enthusiasm. "Today, we explore the heartbeat of Ejoba. You'll see the village in its full day-to-day glory." They set off on foot, following Pulumi down narrow dirt paths lined with flowering bushes and tall palm trees. Children darted around them, laughing and calling to one another, while women sat outside their homes weaving baskets and chatting. Their first stop was the bustling village market. It was a riot of colors and sounds. Stalls overflowed with tropical fruits, vegetables, handmade crafts, and vibrant textiles. Pulumi introduced them to various vendors who eagerly shared stories about their goods. Joy, drawn to the textiles, marveled at the patterns and learned about the meanings behind each design. Emeka, ever curious about local cuisine, sampled some spicy suya offered by a friendly vendor, his approval evident by his enthusiastic thumbs up. As they wandered through the market, Dayo kept his camera busy, capturing the smiles of the villagers and the dynamic colors of the market. Mercy, meanwhile, struck up a conversation with a herbalist, fascinated by the natural remedies and their uses. As they returned, Dayo, still intrigued by the previous night's conversation, found an opportunity to circle back to it. Pulumi, the stories from last night, they're hard to shake off. Is the graveyard far from here? Pulumi, who had been pointing out a kingfisher perched nearby, looked back at him with a serious expression. It's not far, but remember, it's a place of respect. We can walk there, but we must do so with the right mindset. The suggestion hung in the air as the group absorbed the weight of it. There was a mutual, unspoken agreement that they wanted to see it, driven by a mix of curiosity and the human draw to the mysterious and forbidden. Pulumi nodded, understanding their silent consent. "We'll go there this afternoon," he said, a note of caution in his voice. "Remember, it's about understanding and respect. This is not just a tourist spot. It's a sacred place for us." After lunch, the atmosphere among the friends shifted palpably as they prepared to visit the graveyard. Pulumi's earlier stories had planted seeds of apprehension and respect, making the upcoming visit feel more like a pilgrimage than a simple touristic curiosity. The sun was high and hot as they left the village center, the cheerful bustle of the market a stark contrast to their quiet procession towards the outskirts where the graveyard lay. Pulumi led the way, his usual jovial demeanor replaced by a somber respectfulness. As they approached, the first thing that struck them was the silence. It was as if even the wind respected the sanctity of the place, whispering through the tall grasses that bordered the ancient stones. The people buried here were the founders of Ejoba, elders, warriors, and healers. Pulumi explained softly as they passed through the wrought iron gate that marked the entrance. Their spirits are said to protect the village, guiding us with their wisdom from beyond. The graveyard itself was a field of weathered stones and crosses, some so old that the names engraved upon them had been erased by time. Flowers, both fresh and wilted, adorned many graves, tokens of remembrance from villagers. Pulumi stopped before a particularly large tombstone, its surface smooth from years of exposure. This is the grave of Chief Adekunle, a great leader in our history. It's said that his spirit is particularly strong and protective. Dayo, Joy, Emeka, and Mercy listened intently, their earlier bravado tempered by the palpable sense of history and spirituality that enveloped the place. They moved through the graveyard with a growing respect, touching the stones lightly, reading the names, and feeling the weight of centuries under the hot African sun. As they walked, Mercy noticed a particularly secluded spot where the graves were older and less tended. A chill ran down her spine as she peered into the shadows between the tombstones. "Does anyone still visit these?" she asked, her voice lower than usual. "Some families have moved away or died out," Pulumi responded, following her gaze. "These graves are old, from times when the village was just a few families. The spirits here, they are restless, not malevolent, but they long for acknowledgement." The group gathered around an old tree that stood watch over the graveyard. Under its shade, Pulumi suggested they take a moment of silence to honor the spirits. The friends bowed their heads, each lost in their own thoughts, the silence stretching between them like a tangible thing. After a respectful pause, they slowly made their way back to the gate. The air seemed lighter as they exited, a collective relief mixed with a newfound understanding. As they walked back towards the village, Dayo couldn't shake the eerie feeling that had settled in his chest. "Tonight," he said, breaking the silence, "let's not just dismiss what we felt here. There's something profound about this place, something that deserves more than just a passing glance. The others nodded in agreement, the day's experience having bonded them in an unexpected way. They returned to the village with a deeper sense of connection to Ejoba, the gravity of their visit lingering in their minds, mingling with anticipation and an unspoken fear of what the night might bring. As dusk fell over Ejoba, the air cooled, and the village settled into a peaceful evening. The friends gathered once again at the guest house, their earlier solemnity giving way to the familiar comfort of each other's company. Over dinner, they shared their thoughts on the day's visit, but as the palm wine flowed freely, the mood shifted from reflective to mischievous. Emeka, buoyed by the wine, laughed heartily. Today was intense, but we're still here, right? No ghost has come to haunt us yet. Mercy, who was feeling particularly bold after a few glasses, chimed in with a challenging grin. What if the legends are just that, legends? Maybe we need a real test to shake these spirits up a bit. Some of these stories are just lamber and nonsense to scare children. Dio, ever the instigator, raised an eyebrow and leaned forward. Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? What about a bet? Joy proposed, her voice tinged with a daring edge that was rare for her. Let's make it interesting. What if someone had the guts to go back to the graveyard tonight? Not just to visit, but to really challenge the spirits. Emeka and Joy exchanged amused glances. The wine made the idea seem less outrageous than it might have under the sober light of day. If you two are game, we could all go, Emeka suggested. But not just to walk around. Let's make it interesting. The table fell silent for a moment, the gravity of the proposition sinking in. Then Dio laughed, breaking the tension. All right, I'll bite. How about this? 1,000,000 naira to the pair that dares to do more than just visit. Let's say to spend some intimate time on one of those graves. Mercy's eyes widened, but her smile was undeterred. You're on, Dio. Let's see if these spirits are as protective as they say. They agreed to the bet, deciding that Dio and Mercy would take on the challenge, driven partly by bravado and partly by the alcohol clouding their judgment. Equipped with a flashlight and more courage than sense, Dio and Mercy left the guest house under the cover of night. The village was quiet, and the path to the graveyard was lit only by the moon's silver glow. As they approached the gates, the reality of what they were about to do set in. Are we really doing this? Mercy whispered, her voice unsteady. Dio squeezed her hand. It's just a bit of fun, a story to tell when we're old and grey. Come on, let's not back out now. They found their way to a secluded part of the graveyard, where the oldest graves lay under the shadows of overhanging trees. The air was cool and still, and as they settled on a less weathered grave, they tried to laugh off the creepiness. Dio and Mercy, fueled by a mix of adrenaline and alcohol, began to fulfill the dare. Emeka and Joy stood a little way off, their laughter hushed in the solemn atmosphere. Joy, caught up in the moment, shouted jokingly towards her friends, "Make sure you come on the grave." Her laughter echoed off the stone markers, a stark contrast to the silence around them. The moment passed with laughter and nervous giggles, but as they made their way back to the guest house, the gravity of what they had done began to settle in. Palumi's earlier words about respect and the spirit's protection of the village echoed in their minds. Back at their lodging, the group was quieter than before. The thrill of the dare had faded, leaving a lingering unease. They went to bed with a sense of foreboding, the night's disrespect hanging heavily in the air. Dio and Mercy especially felt a growing discomfort, as if the weight of the graveyard soil was clinging to them, a reminder of their reckless challenge to the unseen. The journey back to Lagos was markedly different from their lively arrival in Ejoba. The van was filled with a heavy silence, a stark contrast to the laughter and music that had accompanied their trip to the village. Each friend seemed lost in their own thoughts, the weight of the previous night's actions hanging over them like a dark cloud. As they approached the bustling city, the familiar sights and sounds of Lagos did little to lift the somber mood. The skyline, usually a welcome sight, now seemed to loom ominously, as if mirroring their inner turmoil. Once back in their respective homes, the strange occurrences began almost immediately. The night was settling in, and the city's ever-present buzz mingled with his thoughts, a cacophony that echoed the turmoil within. Despite the fatigue clinging to his bones, Dio felt a gnawing emptiness in his stomach, prompting him to prepare a meal before anything else. In his kitchen, the aromatic spices and rich scents of Ifo Riro filled the air as he set about cooking. The act of stirring the soup and wrapping the soft, warm amala was meditative, a brief respite from the unease that had traveled home with him from Ejoba. Meal finished, Dio turned his attention to a more pressing concern. He had used his camera extensively during the trip, capturing the lush landscapes and vibrant life of Ejoba, but also, unknowingly, something far more sinister. As he inserted the memory card into his computer, expecting to see images of natural beauty and cultural richness, his brow furrowed in confusion and then alarm. Among the expected images were several he had no recollection of taking photos that chilled him to his core. They showed him and Mercy at the graveyard, intimately entangled. The photos had an eerie quality, their figures illuminated by an unnatural light, with the gravestones ghastly sharp in the background. Dio's hands trembled as he clicked through the images. It was impossible. He had never used his camera during that reckless moment. Disbelief and denial surged through him. He considered every logical explanation perhaps a malfunction, or maybe someone had played a cruel joke on him. Yet deep down, the pit of his stomach churned with the undeniable truth that these images were far from ordinary. Something or someone had captured that moment, documenting their desecration. Unable to stomach the sight any longer, Dio shut down his computer. The images, however, lingered in his mind, as vivid and disturbing as if they were still displayed before him. Exhaustion weighed heavily on his eyelids, and despite his anxiety, sleep beckoned as a temporary escape. He crawled into bed, the day's events swirling into the fog of fatigue that enveloped him, but rest proved elusive. As sleep finally claimed him, it dragged him not into peace, but into a vivid continuation of the day's horror. In his dream, Dio was back at the graveyard, but this time the scene was more macabre. The dead surrounded him and Mercy, their decaying hands reaching, their silent accusations echoing in the oppressive stillness of the night. Each face was a grotesque mask of condemnation, their eyes hollow yet piercingly accusative. Dio woke with a start, his heart racing, his sheets tangled around him like a shroud. The boundary between his nightmares and reality was blurring, each feeding into the other until he could no longer tell where one ended and the other began. The photographs on his memory card, an inexplicable, haunting record of a moment they had believed was unseen, now seemed like a grim prophecy or a warning. Determined to find answers and hopefully a resolution, Dio knew what he had to do. Mercy stepped out of her apartment with a forced smile, ready to tackle another day at the bank where she worked. Her professional attire was impeccable, her hair neatly styled, and her makeup applied with precision to project the image of a confident, energetic banker. To any onlooker, Mercy appeared as the epitome of success and vitality. However, beneath the surface, she was fighting a battle that was slowly consuming her peace of mind. Since returning from Ejoba, a disturbing sensation had taken hold of her, a feeling as if grains of sand from the graveyard clung to her skin, invisible yet palpable. This wasn't just a fleeting discomfort, it felt deeply ingrained, as if the very essence of the sacred soil they had so carelessly tread upon was now a part of her. Throughout the morning, Mercy tried to focus on her tasks, reviewing financial statements, meeting with clients, and managing transactions. Yet, the gritty sensation persisted, intensifying with each passing hour. It felt as though the sands were embedded in her pores, scratching her skin from within. In the privacy of her office, she found herself scratching subtly at her arms and neck, trying desperately not to draw attention to her growing unease. By lunchtime, the discomfort had become unbearable. Mercy excused herself from her colleagues, citing a sudden migraine as she hurried to the ladies' room. Once inside the solitude of a stall, she examined her arms and legs, half expecting to see physical traces of dirt or sand. But her skin looked clean, betraying no sign of the torment it inflicted upon her. Determined to rid herself of the feeling, Mercy turned to the sink and began scrubbing her hands and arms with soap, rubbing the skin more harshly than necessary. The water ran clear, yet it did nothing to alleviate the sensation of filth that haunted her. The more she washed, the more intense the feeling became, a cruel paradox that left her feeling helpless and frustrated. Mercy glanced at her reflection in the mirror, her expression one of distress. She knew her behavior was irrational, yet she couldn't control the overwhelming urge to cleanse herself of the graveyard's invisible residue. With a deep, steadying breath, she attempted to compose herself, fixing her makeup and smoothing down her blouse. Returning to her desk, Mercy tried to immerse herself in her work, but the sensation of the clinging sand distracted her. It was as if the sacred ground they had desecrated was exacting its revenge, embedding itself into her very being as a constant reminder of their disrespect. By the end of the day, exhausted and emotionally drained, Mercy knew she could no longer ignore the severity of her condition. It wasn't just physical discomfort, it was a profound violation of her spirit and body. After the unsettling trip to Ejoba, Joy returned to the solitude of her apartment in Lagos, hoping to find some semblance of normalcy in the familiar confines of her home. But the moment she stepped out of the cab and walked through her front door, a chilling sensation washed over her. It felt as though she was not entering alone. An invisible presence seemed to cross the threshold with her, its silent footsteps echoing alongside hers. Trying to shake off the unease, Joy attributed the feeling to the exhaustion and residual fear from their graveyard visit. She busied herself with unpacking, methodically placing her belongings back in their rightful places, hoping the mundane activity would distract her mind. However, as the evening crept in, the sense of being watched intensified. The apartment, usually a sanctuary, now felt oppressively close, as if the walls themselves were closing in around her. Every creak and groan of the building set her nerves on edge, but it was the voices that truly unnerved her. Clear and unmistakable, Joy began to hear echoes of her own words from that night at the graveyard. The phrase, "Make sure you come on the grave," which she had uttered in jest, now reverberated through the rooms with a menacing clarity. Frozen in place, Joy listened as her own voice bounced around her, each repetition more taunting than the last. The atmosphere thickened, the air around her growing cold as the whispers seemed to swirl in a ghostly dance. Heart-pounding, she called out tentatively, "Hello? Is anyone here with me?" Silence followed her query, the kind of silence that pressed down, heavy and expectant. Then, a subtle rustling from a corner of her apartment shattered the quiet. "Emeka, if that's you, please come out. I don't like people sneaking up on me," she called out, her voice a mix of hope and fear. But no answer came, only the continued whispers, now seeming to close in on her. Her phone trembled in her hand as she dialed Emeka's number, her eyes darting around the dimly lit room, searching for any sign of the intruder she felt certain was there. It was then that she felt a gentle but unmistakably real touch on her shoulder. A scream froze in her throat as she slowly turned, only to come face to face with a translucent figure, its features blurred but undeniably human. The ghostly apparition bore a sorrowful expression, its eyes hollow with an eternal grief that pierced Joy's soul. As recognition dawned that this was no ordinary burglar but a spectre, possibly one of the spirits from the graveyard, her strength faltered. The room spun around her as the edges of her vision blurred, and with a final, choked scream, Joy collapsed onto the wooden floor, consciousness slipping away as the figure loomed over her. When she awoke, the room was silent, the ghostly presence gone as if it had never been there. But the echoes of her own words and the chilling encounter were branded into her mind, a terrifying reminder of the sacrilege they had committed. Shaken to her core, Joy knew that no amount of rational explanation could erase what she had experienced. They had awakened something at that graveyard, something that had followed her home, demanding recognition and retribution. As the shadows of the evening crept across Lagos, Mercy picked up her phone, the weight of the past few days pressing heavily on her. She dialed Dio's number, her fingers trembling slightly as she held the phone to her ear. When Dio answered, his voice was tinged with fatigue and discomfort, mirroring her own feelings. "Hey babe, how are you doing?" Mercy tried to keep her voice light, but her concern was palpable. Dio sighed, the sound heavy with unrest. Not so good. The past few days have not been the best of my days. I can't even explain how I'm feeling. Sorry I haven't called you lately. How are you doing? Mercy paused, taking a deep breath before confessing her own unsettling experience. Not so good, Deo. You know, I feel like the sand from that grave clung to my skin. I feel dirty, and I can't just wash off this feeling. There was a moment of silence on the line as Deo absorbed her words. It was clear now that what they had experienced at the graveyard was not limited to a mere chill or a fleeting shadow. It had embedded itself into their very beings, manifesting in deeply personal and disturbing ways. Mercy, that's exactly it. I've been feeling off too, Deo finally responded. His voice was low, filled with a dawning realization of the gravity of their situation. I've been having these nightmares ever since we got back. It's like we brought something back with us from that place. Mercy nodded to herself, feeling a chill run down her spine, even though Deo couldn't see her. I think we did, Deo. This isn't just guilt or stress. Something's wrong. We did something terrible there, and it's like we're being haunted by it. Deo paused, and when he spoke again, his tone had changed. There was a hint of skepticism, perhaps a protective layer of humor to shield himself from the full impact of their reality. You know, maybe we're just overthinking this. Spirits, hauntings. It all sounds like something out of a bad movie. Maybe this will all clear up on its own. Even spirits must get tired of haunting, right? Mercy couldn't help but let out a small laugh, despite the seriousness of their situation. Deo's attempt to lighten the mood was typical of him, always trying to find a way to smile through the darkness. I wish I could believe that, she replied, her voice a mix of amusement and worry. But something tells me this isn't going to just go away. We stirred something up, Deo, and I really think we need to face it. Look, let's give it some time, Deo suggested, his tone still carrying a hint of levity. Maybe all this is just our minds playing tricks on us after that creepy experience. Let's wait and see if things settle down. Mercy sighed, knowing Deo was probably just as scared as she was, but dealing with it in his own way. All right, Deo, we'll wait a bit. But if this doesn't stop, we need to seriously consider going back and making things right. Agreed, Deo conceded, though his voice betrayed his hope that it wouldn't come to that. Let's keep an eye on things and stay in touch about it. If it gets worse, we'll reconsider your plan. As they ended the call, Mercy felt a mix of frustration and concern. Deo's skepticism wasn't unusual, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this was something they couldn't just ignore. The resolution seemed as elusive as the shadows that now haunted her days and nights, but she knew one thing for sure. If the disturbances didn't stop, they would have to take action, whether Deo was fully on board or not. Emeka, a programmer by day and a self-proclaimed ladies' man by night, had just clocked out from a long day at work. As he slipped into his car, the sultry voice of Brimo filled the space, setting a relaxed tone for the drive home. It was late, close to 9 p.m., but the vibrant life of Lagos never truly dimmed, and neither did Emeka's spirits. As he cruised down the familiar streets, his headlights caught a figure waving him down. A woman, dressed in a striking red gown, stood by the roadside, her presence like a siren call. Emeka, ever the opportunist, saw this as a perfect end to his day. He pulled over, his heart racing with anticipation. "Which way are you heading?" he asked with a hurried enthusiasm. "I'm going your way," the woman replied, her voice smooth and enigmatic. A mischievous smile spread across Emeka's face as he invited her to hop in. The car door closed, and as they drove off, he felt a subtle shift in the atmosphere. It was as if the air had thickened, charged with an unspoken tension. Emeka was oblivious to his phone buzzing with calls from Mercy. He was too engrossed with his new companion, though she remained curiously silent as they progressed. Her demeanor was unsettling. She stared fixedly ahead, occasionally humming a tune that seemed foreign to his ears. "What is your name?" he asked, trying to ignite some conversation. The woman did not respond. He tried again. "What were you doing outside alone at this time of night? You know, it's quite dangerous in Lagos for a lady like you to be out this late." Still, she said nothing. Her silence was eerie, her focus never wavering from the windshield. Emeka's initial intrigue turned to concern. "Are you okay? You haven't said a word since this trip started, he prodded once more. At that moment, her demeanor shifted dramatically. She began to laugh, a chilling, unsettling sound that made Emeka's skin crawl. Before his eyes, she began to transform. Her features twisted into something grotesque, no longer human but monstrous. Panicked, Emeka slammed on the brakes and scrambled out of the car, screaming for help. His heart pounded as he ran, not daring to look back. Passers-by, drawn by his cries, rushed to his aid. Together, they approached the car, cautiously peering inside. To Emeka's shock and confusion, the car was empty. No sign of the mysterious woman, only the faint echo of her haunting laugh seemed to linger in the air. The people around him exchanged wary glances, some murmuring about hallucinations and stress. Emeka, breathless and disoriented, sank to the curb, his mind racing to make sense of what had happened. Was it all in his head, or had something truly otherworldly occurred? As he sat there, confused and frightened, Emeka realized that the night's events were far from normal. Whatever he had experienced was deeply unsettling, pushing the boundaries of his understanding of reality. Emeka sat on the curb, his hands trembling as he clutched his phone. The night air felt unusually cold, and every shadow seemed to flicker with the remnants of his terrifying encounter. With a deep breath to steady his nerves, he dialed Dayo's number. The phone rang, each tone echoing his racing heart until Dayo's familiar voice came through. "Hey Emeka, what's up?" Dayo's voice was casual, unknowing of the ordeal Emeka had just experienced. "Dayo, man, something happened on my way back home tonight. Something really messed up," Emeka started, his voice shaky. There was a pause on the line, as Dayo sensed the seriousness in his friend's tone. "What happened? Are you okay?" Emeka recounted the strange encounter with the woman in the red gown, how she had transformed into something horrific right beside him, and how he had fled the car in absolute terror, only to find it empty when help arrived. As he spoke, his voice was filled with a mixture of fear and desperation for understanding. Dayo listened quietly, the line silent except for Emeka's fraught storytelling. When Emeka finished, there was a heavy pause. Dayo, ever the skeptic and the adventurer of the group, struggled to reconcile his friend's terror with his own beliefs about the rational world. "Emeka, man, that's wild. But you sure you weren't just, high or something? Hope you weren't drinking and driving," Dayo said, half-jokingly, trying to lighten the mood but also subtly casting doubt. Emeka felt a flash of frustration. "No, Dayo, I swear. I was completely sober. It was real. It, whatever that was, it was real," he insisted, his voice rising slightly in his distress. Dayo, sensing Emeka's agitation, decided to tread more carefully. Okay, I hear you, but you know how the mind can play tricks, especially after a long day. Stress, fatigue, can all seem pretty real." "But it was real, Dayo." Emeka pushed back, his frustration evident. The dismissal of his experience stung, especially coming from someone he had hoped would understand. "Look, let's meet up tomorrow, all right? We can talk more about this then. Maybe you just need some rest, and things will look clearer in the morning," Dayo suggested, still not fully convinced but willing to offer the benefit of the doubt. Reluctantly, Emeka agreed. "Fine, let's meet up. Maybe you're right," he conceded, though the conviction in his voice was forced. The call ended with plans to meet, but Emeka felt a lingering sense of isolation. His encounter, as real and terrifying as it had been brushed aside, leaving him to question not only what he had seen but also his own sanity. The phone buzzed insistently on the kitchen counter, pulling Mercy from her thoughts. She wiped her hands dry before answering, recognizing Joy's number on the screen. "Hey, Joy," Mercy greeted, her voice heavy with the weight of her recent experiences. "Mercy, hi. I need to talk to someone about what's been happening. How are you holding up?" Joy's voice trembled slightly, betraying her usual composure. Mercy sighed, a sense of relief washing over her at not being alone in her distress. "Honestly, not great. Joy, it's like the sand from that graveyard is stuck to my skin. I've showered so many times, but I still feel dirty, like it's clinging to me." There was a pause on the line as Joy processed Mercy's words. Mercy, promise me you won't think I'm losing my mind, but I've been feeling something eerie too. After we came back, it's like something followed me home. Mercy's heart raced, her own fears mirrored in Joy's confession. What do you mean something followed you home? It's going to sound crazy. But the other night, I felt like someone was in my apartment with me. I even thought I felt someone tap my shoulder. When I turned around, I saw a ghost, Mercy. Then I fainted. The room spun slightly around Mercy as she absorbed Joy's words. The similarity in their experiences was too stark to be mere coincidence. You saw a ghost? Joy, this is all starting to make sense. It's like whatever we did at that graveyard is haunting us now. Exactly. And it's terrifying. I don't know what to do. Have you talked to Deo about this? Joy asked, a note of desperation in her voice. I did, I called him. But Deo, he thinks we should just wait a few more days. He thinks it might just go away, Mercy explained, frustration coloring her tone. Joy was silent for a moment, then said resolutely, Mercy, I don't think waiting is going to help. This isn't something that's just in our heads. We need to do something. Mercy nodded to herself, feeling a surge of proactive energy. You're right. We can't just sit around and hope things get better. Maybe we should all meet, talk about everything face to face. We need to know if Emeka is experiencing anything strange too. That's a good idea. Let's arrange a meeting. I'll call Emeka and see if he's free tomorrow. We need to figure this out together, understand what's happening to all of us, Joy suggested, her voice steadier now that they had a plan. Thanks, Joy. It helps knowing I'm not going through this alone, Mercy said, a genuine smile touching her lips for the first time in days. Neither are you, Mercy. We'll sort this out together. I'll set up the meeting and get back to you with the time and place, Joy assured her before they ended the call. As Mercy hung up, she felt a mixture of anxiety and determination. The road ahead was uncertain, and the thought of facing the consequences of their actions was daunting. Yet, there was comfort in unity, in knowing that her friends were with her in this strange and unnerving journey. The thought fortified her resolve to confront whatever lay ahead, strengthened by the shared bond of their eerie experiences. The meeting would be crucial, a first step toward understanding and hopefully resolving the dark cloud that had descended over their lives since that fateful night at the graveyard. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel to watch more videos like this.